A proud son, born in 1946, Cheyenne, Wyoming. A proud son of the capital of that great state. And at the ripe old age of 6 years old in 1952, he's playing slow pitch softball. Of course, and then I have to position players, and this fine gentleman ended up, if somebody said, well, who wants to catch? Who wants to catch? And this fine gentleman said, I'm going to catch. And how did that nickname happen? Right there, Yogi. Okay, and he's a big Yankee fan.
Right.
Okay, 1952. So now we progress to 1964, graduate of Cheyenne Central High School. But the year before in 63, played second base for the American Legion Post 6 state champion. So hardball is in his heritage also. Then graduate high school 64, on to University of Wyoming, majoring in political science, thinking about maybe politics, maybe law following that. 1968 again, graduate, University of Wyoming, commissioned as second lieutenant, ROTC, in the Army Transportation Corps. The Army is broken down into a lot of different branches, and his was Transportation Corps. That's 1968. 69, 70 to Vietnam. And he served our country very well over there in Vietnam and was rewarded the Bronze Star in the process. So quite an honor for the judge. Back to University of Wyoming Law School, 71 to 74, gets that law degree, and next 5 years private practice there in Cheyenne. And then he got to know Democrat Governor Ed Hirschler in Wyoming. You haven't seen many Democrat governors in Wyoming for a while. And Yogi knew him, and the judge and Governor Hirschler knew him as a very talented lawyer and appointed him to as a circuit court trial judge in Wyoming. And the next 27 years, he served his state very ably, and I'm sure we'd be here till midnight talking about some wonderful cases that you had. But after 27 years in the judgeship there, he decided, I got to retire and pay more attention to collecting baseball cards. So he did exactly that. And Joe Carriero tells a wonderful story about being up in Cheyenne with the judge, and he said one time it took him about a half hour to go 2 blocks because he knows everybody up there and everybody knows him. And so there you go. I mean, outgoing, friendly. I wouldn't be surprised if a few people stopped by that you threw in the slammer.
Oh yeah.
And, but they probably still liked you. It was probably good for them. So I guess one last thing, in fact, I'm wearing them right now. I'm a big fan of President John F. Kennedy. I got his socks on today. And 1962, he and Jackie threw a special dinner in the White House for 49 Nobel Prize winners. It's pretty elite stuff. It's a wonderful chapter in Kennedy administration history. And 49 Nobel Prize winners, the arts, science, you name it, literature, everything. And so JFK got up and he gave a toast, and he said, this is the finest assemblage of talent, of knowledge ever assembled in the White House at one time, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. Is it? I mean, that's something. Maybe only JFK could get away. I mean, but what a compliment to Jefferson, and without hopefully diminishing those 49 winners there. So I would, in closing, I want to say that this looks like the finest assemblage of baseball card collecting talent in one place in Denver, with the possible exception of when this fine gentleman, at the age of 6 years old, opened his first pack of Bowman cards alone at home. Ladies and gentlemen, my pleasure to introduce Judge Yogi Allen.
Oh, thanks, Greg. Okay. Well, I'll be brief. The player that I always remember that was kind of an obscure player, but he was on those great Yankee teams. But anyway, the guy that I always remember was a roommate of Mantle, and his name was Bob Serb. And he was on the back of his card, it said, born Cheyenne, Wyoming. So I don't know, I kind of gravitated toward Bob Cerv, but I think he was a good ball player that, was not in the limelight, because the Yanks had a lot of players in the limelight. Okay, well, I'm gonna start off. I want to talk just about baseball cards, and I've collected through the years. 1952, I was only 6, but I had a big brother 5 years older than me, and he was really into it, so I had a good teacher, I guess. And we didn't, to my knowledge, have baseball cards growing up in Cheyenne. But our family took a road trip, and I can imagine without interstate highways. And anyway, 3 kids in the back and an old 47 Pontiac, and we drove from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Falls Church, Virginia, where my mom's brother, my uncle, was stationed at the Pentagon. And anyway, so we stayed in Falls Church and played ball. But that's when I didn't really open the pack. I saw my cousin's baseball cards. They were mostly 50, 51, 52 Bowman, which looked very similar. And then, but there were some tops in there. It was a great year for tops in 52. So that really piqued my interest. And so when we came back, I found a store to buy some 52 tops is what they sold. But they didn't even put out the last series of that toward the end of the year, were the real valuable cards. We didn't ever see any of those. We didn't know they existed. So, okay, let me start off by saying I just cut out some of these clippings through the years, and they really are not necessary. They're baseball stuff, so let's read them. You guys know a lot of these answers. I can tell that this is a pretty smart group, but okay, we talk about African Americans, and we all know that, or we at least think that Jackie Robinson in 1947 was the first black player in the major leagues. Well, and you guys probably know this, but if you go back 100 years to the 1880s, there was a black player who was a pretty good player. Does anybody happen to know and it was a major league team. Toledo was in the major leagues in 1884. Do any of you know
Moses.
Well, no, this guy's name here is Fleet Walker.
Yeah, Moses Fleetwood Walker.
Oh,
Moses
okay,
Fleetwood Walker,
Moses,
yeah.
okay, cool. And it says here, Fleet Walker became the first African American to appear in a big league game in 1884. Walker was the catcher for the Toledo Blue Stockings. And anyway, Toledo and Louisville were both part of the American Association, which was a major league team in the 1880s. Before entering the professional ranks, Fleet attended Oberlin College, which I believe is in Ohio, and the University of Michigan. Walker appeared in 42 games, so he was the first Negro American. He was the first black to be in the major leagues.
They passed him off as a Cuban, because there was still all that racism.
Sure.
And they told him, if anybody interviews you or talks to you, pretend like you can't speak English.
That's good. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Now the next one, and now we go to the 1890s. The National League adopts new rules for the upcoming season. They changed the distance, big deal, from 55 feet to 60, not 60.6. It was first changed from 55 to 60. They outlawed flat bats, and any motion meant by a pitcher, any motion intended to deceive the base runner, which I think happens all the time, but anyway, any motion meant by a pitcher to deceive the base runner would be called a ball. However, due to sloppy handwriting on the blueprint of the new diamond, the pitching distance, just by accident or whatever, became 60 feet 6 inches. So that was kind of thrown in. Nobody knew the difference. But that little bit of difference makes a lot. Gives the batter a little chance. The longer distance will have a profound impact on offense. The National League's cumulative batting average among its 12 teams in 1892 the average went from 280 to the next year, 93, to the team average of 309. Runs per game will rise from 5 per team, each game 5, to 7 in 1894. That's a lot of runs. Okay, we're about done with this before I get to my collection. Cap Anson, of course, was one of the first well-known. He was born in 1852, so he would have remembered the American Civil War. But anyway, so now we got Cap Anson came along, and it said that he was such a good manager. Let's see, and the executives, okay, and a lot of people involved in baseball were naturally from the South. Southern Commissioner Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis was from Tennessee, and they were very firm, and they did not want a black player in the major leagues, which is very unfortunate, but that's the way things were. So who was the only major league player to hit 60 or more home runs 3 times? Do you guys know that?
Sammy Sosa.
Yep. Sosa walloped 66 home runs. This was in the juicing days, I believe. In 98, he hit 66. Yeah, this is hard to believe even now. And then the next year he hit 63, and then he didn't lead the league. He was then topped by Mark McGwire, 70 in 1998. And then Bonds had 73, but those are just amazing statistics, and they kind of make me feel sad because those guys were generally juiced. There are certain records that should be disregarded. I wrote this, and it's probably not accurate, but I was upset at the time. There are certain records that should be disregarded by baseball. First of all records prior to 1893. Because the way the game was played so differently, overhand pitching became dominant, and also allowed in the second there any record that was established while the playing. Then later on in our era came the performance, the PEDs, the performance in town and a home in Falls Church, Virginia, and my cousin who was 2 years ahead of me, he comes up and says, "Hey, you ever seen these?" No, they were the Bowman baseball cards, and they intrigued me. You know, I couldn't hardly read, but my big brother was explaining it to everybody. And one of the first cards I got, and we threw them in the air. You know, we didn't, nowadays everything's men or whatever, I don't know, but we didn't know anything about that. And if you played war and you threw the cards in the air, if they came down face down, they got killed. Face up, they kept living. So we did that, and we colored them. On the back of the card, here's a card of a guy you will know, but it's a brown spot, a crayon, because he was a PFC in my army, and I was color-coded. But the value, of course, is 0. Once you mark a car, especially a ballpoint pen, I've learned that I don't care. It's basically no value when you start marking cards. You can't sell them. Okay, then this guy here played right field. I about said his name. Who were the 3 outfielders for the Dodgers during their heyday in the mid-50s? We, of course, know Duke Snyder was in center. Do you guys remember the Cuban that played left?
Perillo, Snyder.
And who was that Cuban in left field? He was pretty good.
Sandy Ambrose?
Yeah. So you had Ambrose in left, Snyder, and then in right here's Carl Ferrello's card, and he's had some rough days. I'll pass it around. I don't need it back, by the way.
That's a 52 Bowman?
Yeah, that's a 52 Bowman of Carl Ferrello, and Ferrello on any other team would have probably been a star. But the Dodgers were very good, and he was just the right fielder, and I think he took it personally and complained that, but no, I think he was a good guy. He was an Italian from, I believe, Philadelphia.
I read Duke Snyder's book, and he said the best player on the team was Gil Hodges.
Yeah.
He was a tremendous player.
Yeah.
He was a great
He never got the recognition that Snyder
No,
did.
It's Duke Snyder, Campanella. They had
Yeah.
great
Finally
pitching.
Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah, he finally made it.
Finally.
Yeah.
You're talking about playing war with your cards. Well, guys used to fling them against the wall, and whoever's card got closest took all the cards. And then it was a little bit later on when I was collecting that. I don't know who this guy is. We'll just pick a clothespin and put them on the frame of the bicycle, and they'll make a noise for about 30 feet, and you had a motorcycle for that long.
Yeah, right. I remember those days. Of course, I'm named after, the Barra. You guys all know Barra's first and last name.
The cartoon character?
Huh?
The cartoon character?
Yeah, no. That's funny. I, of course, knew who Lawrence Peter Barra was from the time I was 6. He was a very famous ball player. Him and Campanella were great catchers. And so, going along with that, and so then I knew Yogi Berra, and then when I was in junior high, somebody said, "Are you Yogi Berra?" I said, "Who's Yogi the Bear?" He said. And I said, "Who the heck is Yogi the Bear?"
Yogi the Bear.
So that name took over from Yogi Berra for at least a decade.
Did they ever have any friends of yours that they called Boo Boo?
Oh yeah, I've been through Boo Boo.
Me.
Yeah, right. That's Boo Boo. Yeah. So then, let me just cut to the quick. So I passed out Ferrello's card. And by the way, he had a pretty unique nickname. Where was Carl Ferrello from? What state do you think? He was from Pennsylvania, Eastern.
Carl Ferrello.
Ferrello was the right fielder.
And you said Philadelphia, did you?
Yeah, and I'm quite sure he was from, I know he's from Pennsylvania, and I think he was from Philadelphia. And he had a very good nickname.
It wasn't Keystone.
No, it was a name that most of the people way out here pronounced the name of the town wrong. But his nickname, because he had such a great arm. In right field, if you hit a double against the Dodgers, you wouldn't go to third.
Something
You would
rifle.
not go to
Yeah.
third, because he'd throw you out. So he was
Reading rifle?
the Reading Rifle.
Wow.
He was the Reading Rifle was Carl Ferrello. Okay, and now we're going to go ahead on a couple other nicknames. We already said Vera. Here's a couple of easy ones. What was Duke Snyder's real first name?
Edwin?
Yes, very good. And let's see, I did not know this till I looked it up. Maybe I should have. Tug McGraw. What's his real name? Always Tug. You never hear this name. All right. Frank is Frank McGraw.
And if you had a Donruss card, Donruss always put the full name on the back of the card for many years.
Oh, did
So
they?
you would have known that if you had the Donruss card.
Right. One other easy one here. Well, I think it's relatively easy. What was the real first name of a guy named Mudcat Grant?
Jim.
And then we get into a little more difficult area than these names oh, by the way, some last names have changed from the time his first baseball card came out, and then his name was listed as Smith, and then 2 years later he's listed as Jones. But I'm just using that as an example. There was a player that came up, and you guys are more familiar with these newer cards than I am, but he came up and his, okay, let me just cut to the quick. What was Big Pappy's first name before it was, what name? David
Ortiz.
But when he came up, his first baseball cards didn't say David Ortiz on it. He was David Arias. A-R-I-S, and I'll just pass that around for the heck of it. But yeah, I got a David Arias card, and we didn't know him, but that's Big Pappy later on. And a couple other nicknames here that are very difficult. There was a, let's see, there's a picture of a guy named Rocky Bridges who had a big chew at them. Have a full set each year from 1950 till a couple of years ago. So I have all the 50 set, I've got the 52, I've got every card in very average or less than average condition. That's how I could afford to buy them. And so I have every card, and until recently I sold 25 of my probably are my most valuable cards. And this handout here that's going to come around explains, it brought a lot more money than I thought. We all want our cards to be worth a lot, but especially when they're rated 3 out of 10 or even 2, they're just not rated. They're not, but they do bring a good sales price. For my 52 Mantle, which I picked up for $500 during the 1970s, that by far overshadows the rest of the collection. And they say there's only 118 of the 52 Mantles. I don't know, that's a pretty low number. In existence is what, you guys know more about card collecting than I do, but There aren't very many 52 mantlets, period, whether it's 118 or not. And that, of course, sold for the most of anything. I have to hire an auction. When you guys got these expensive cards, don't try to sell them. You can try to sell them one at a time, but I don't know. I hired an auctioneer, and he took 18%, might as well say 20% of the sales price, but he has all the contacts of the big collectors. These aren't 10-year-old kids. This is businessmen. And he knew how to run an auction, so I hired him. And so when the sales price of the card sounds good, but once you give the price for the auction, because I auctioned 25 cards, and that's what this list is about. Once you pay for the auctioneer, which is nearly 20%, and also the federal income tax, and now I pay Colorado income tax, you're talking 20% again. So it's not all gravy. It's not all, I didn't get all gravy, and then of course you have to have them encapsulated and graded, or else these big time people they won't take a card. Their eyes will be open when they see a 52 mantle, but you got to have them graded to be put in the system of the real expensive cards. So, okay, everybody saw poor old Mordecai Brown, and I'm gonna hand out. I have made copies. I didn't bring any actual cards here today, but I've made copies, starting with the 50 Bowmans. And the first card I ever laid eyes on was a 52 Sandy Consuegra, another Cuban. The Washington Senators recruited Cuba extensively. And so anyway, I got Sandy Consuegra. He came out a 4 rating, VGX, and it's probably worth $20. But that's the first card I ever saw, and I still remember that from 1952. I was impressed. And so that's what I wanted to do, was collect cards. But we didn't have much money, you know. My dad was a city fireman, but you know, we just went day to day. And it wasn't until I retired and could collect all my thoughts that I went and really completed each set. The only 2 sets I completed growing up were the 59 tops and the 60 tops. I was just the right age. I was like 13 and 14. I had a little job watering lawns, so I had some cash, and I went out and bought these 59 and 56, and I took care of them. Most of the cards you see that I have copies of are in terrible shape. When I was 6, 7, 8 years old, we just didn't know, you know, they were just something to play with. But my 59 and 60 sets are very good. I'm not going to say they're 10s, they're not, but they're probably 5 and 6. I don't own any cards that are 8, 9, or 10. I don't even know what those look like. But they must be nice, because I think 5 and 6s are very nice. So, let me hand this, this is the American League first, and you guys kind of thumb through it so everybody gets a chance to see. It goes from 1950 through 1960, so it's 11 years of the cards, and I have the prices on there. Let me start with you, Chip, and look through that and pass it on, and we'll keep it moving. And then I'll start over here with the National League. The National League, I start with the 50 Giants. I don't know why I picked out.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the National League is the senior circuit.
1876. Yeah. You're a Cubs fan, so you would say that. But
John
yeah.
and I, we know that.
And now, let's see. I got all. If anybody didn't get a handout, that's what we're going to go through next. All right. Thanks, Brian. And these people, as part of the fee, they're responsible to advertise ahead of time. It's like a 2-month process. They don't just say. So I had to take my cards. They were all encapsulated and they were all graded, and I gave them to this guy in Scottsdale. That's where I spend the winter months. And he said, we've done baseball cards before. He said, in fact, we put out every 6 months a catalog of what we're going to be selling. So he convinced me he was the right guy. So I'll pass the catalog on. But my cards, and then he advertised the cards to all these high rollers. And I couldn't have done all that. I don't even know who they are. And so I had to sign a contract, you know, and the auctioneer's going to get, it's really, I say 20% because it's easier to say, but 18% of the profit goes immediately to the auctioneer, but I couldn't do it without him. And so he said, we're gonna take your 10 or 12 best cards, and these are actually my cards, and we're gonna take a photo of them, and we're gonna put it out to all the high rollers and see if, to activate them, to get them ready for the auction, which is coming up. And so here's my cards, and it's a great catalog. I'll pass this.
So did you get what you expected by
No,
putting?
that's the thing. I did well. I got more than I ever could have on my own. So you have to look at things relatively. And if you look at it in this perspective that I paid 1 cent for most of these cards, I made a hell of a lot of money. And so, no, I expected, as you will see in the book that goes around you guys, that, no, I might have wanted 300 for a Whitey Ford, 51 rookie Whitey Ford. All these cards are in bad condition, you guys. And so I wanted 300, and I think I got 200. But then you turn around and there's one Willie Mays card, I think a 55, that I expected to get, oh, it doubled. I expected to get $1,000 out of it, and it's $2,000 I got. So it all, yeah.